sports fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I'm your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET, 1490am.com. Your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. You can also catch this show live on Alexa by saying, Alexa, play KMET Radio for your listening pleasure. On the telephone line today, I welcome in well-known and acclaimed sports art dealer. We welcome in Neil Scherer. Neil, Brian C., thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me in, Brian.
Absolutely, Neil. So let's begin. Let's talk a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your history with your love of sports.
Yes, Brian, I'm an attorney. I'm an art dealer, but I've been a sports enthusiast since I was a kid. And like most kids who enjoy sports, it has a lot to do with their father. And my father, although he was born in Brooklyn, was a Yankee fan, so he pushed the Yankees a little bit upon us. But he also, to teach us the game, he used to have us, at least myself, watch the games on TV and explain it to me. And even my first recollection was watching in 1966. I'm an old guy. I was 6 years old, though, then. I watched the New York Giants get pulverized by the Washington Redskins 73-41. And even today, that's still a record for most points in a football game. And although it winded my father trying to explain to me what was going on because there was so much offense, I think even after that, I started to really appreciate records. And, my first game was a record-setting game.
Now, Neil, you grew up in Mount Vernon, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, did you collect sports cards as a kid? What are some of your earliest recollections of collecting sports cards in the 60s and 70s, if you did?
Yes. It was a lot of fun back then, and of course, I loved it. I used to run with, I don't know what is a quarter or 25 or dollar, whatever. I think I would buy cards 2 or 3 times a week. And of course, back then we would play games, flipping it and all that, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. I remember, getting Mickey Mantle cards. Of course, they weren't the rookie cards, so it was later in his career, and Willie Mays. But I do remember, I think, getting a couple of the Nolan Ryan, Jerry Koosman rookie cards back in, I think, 68. So cards were very important to me. The problem for me, unlike other people who blame their mothers for throwing out cards, when I had a nice collection, I went to University of Wisconsin my freshman year. I came back, and I don't know what my brothers did with it, but most of my card collection was gone. So that was my story, unfortunately. But again, cards were very, very much important part of getting me interested in the game. And of course, I loved looking at the statistics behind the card and learning about a player's career and their history.
Yeah, and it looks like the baseball cards are an important part of what you do. So let's discuss a little bit exactly what you call conversational sports art. What does that refer to, and when did this idea first develop for you?
The idea actually developed because of the hated Boston Red Sox. In 2004, I was at the Game 7, when the Yankees, after a 3-0 lead, blew it. And at that game, by the 7th inning, although the Yankees normally can make a comeback, it was pretty evident the game was over. The fans had left, and my brother, who I used to go to games with, even left in the 7th inning. Anyway, the game ended, and I thought it'd be nice. I congratulated the Red Sox fans because it felt like it was Fenway Park by the 9th inning, or the Yankee fans had left. And most of them were a few of them gave me cursed me out, but most of them were just saying, "You don't realize how important this is to me. Thank you. This is the most important moment of my life. I wish my father was around. I wish my grandfather was around." So what I did was I sent I took the ticket from that game, and I put it in a nice frame piece, and I sent it to a friend of my, a father of one of my friends who's a big Red Sox fan. I said, "Congratulations on the victory. Nobody deserves it more than you. Remember, it happens once every 86 years. And this was a man who collected incredible art collection, because I'm an art dealer too. And he said to me, "Neil, don't tell my wife, but it was up to me. I put the Mondrian and Hopper aside, and I put this in a place of honor." So at that point, what registered to me was how important sports is to us in our lives and our culture. But I wanted to do something different. I don't come from the memorabilia world, per se. I come from the art world. And I wanted to make something a little bit different than a single autograph or a single ticket or a single program. I wanted to tell stories by putting a compilation of many, many items, rare items, together to tell a story. And based on the reaction I was getting from people, it was usually wows is the first thing you see when people look at it. I noticed people either talking to the piece, or if two strangers came, they started talking about the piece. And although it's hard to describe what we have, we decided to call this the term sports conversation art, because anybody who looks at our one-of-a-kind displays generally starts a conversation either with the piece or with a stranger who's watching the piece as well.
I mean, it definitely sounds like an innovative idea. Would you consider yourself or label yourself as a pioneer in this field of sports memorabilia, or were there other dealers doing this prior to you?
Well, you know what? When I did the idea, I didn't realize how people would evaluate it. But I've noticed a number of well-known people who are generally considered memorabilia people, or people in baseball. Marty Appel, one of the great Yankee historians, he says nobody does what you do. The word unique is tossed around quite a bit. And just to give you an example, one of our favorite pieces is Mickey Mantle, the hero of my father's generation. And I actually saw him hit a home run in 1967, his 513th, off of a guy named Bill Dillman. Anyway, one of his records is 18 World Series home runs. So imagine a piece about 4 feet by 3 feet. Our pieces are pretty monumental in size and scope, I guess. Dead center, you have a great picture of a young, handsome Mickey Mantle, of course, is signed by him. And surrounding a piece of the tickets from every World Series game that Mickey Mantle hit a home run in. And if that's not enough, we have underneath the ticket the autograph of the pitcher he hit the home runs off of. And again, what makes it fascinating for us, we knew the sports fan was going to love our stuff, but I was a little bit surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been, how history and art lovers love it too, because presentation is also very important to us. And I think people get, as I said, the most interesting word, and the word we hear most often, whether at a client's home or at a museum or at a gallery, is wow. We hear that all over the place, and that's what we get when they look at our pieces, including the mantelpiece.
Yeah, you mentioned the galleries. Can you talk about some of the public exhibits that your pieces have been associated with?
Yeah, thank you very much again. As I said, I'm an art dealer, and one of the reasons that I think it's been interesting, our idea, which came in a 4-floor walk-up here in New York City, all the way to Madison Avenue, some of the great galleries in Madison Avenues and stores, and now featured at museums. But I was working at the Mattituck Museum on an art project that's in Waterbury, Connecticut. And just for the heck of it, I said to the curator there, I said, is this Yankee territory or Red Sox territory? And the curator said, well, we consider ourselves a dividing line between the two rivals. And I immediately said, why don't you do a show? And a week later, the curator called me up and said, we're going to do the show, but you have to be the curator. And although I thought of myself as an art dealer, I had never curated a show, but I really took it as quite a challenge. And the show featured our pieces dealing with the Red Sox and Yankees, of course, great history there. And the show lasted 9 months. We got a 2-month extension. It was doing so well, and we won some awards because of it. And of course, when you have that, we dealt with anywhere from the Yankee greats. You know, I've talked about the mantelpiece. We had a DiMaggio piece dealing with his hitting streak, where we had the autographs of every pitcher he got a hit off during that streak, and then we have the autographs of Keltner and people who stopped the streak in that particular piece. We have Don Larson's perfect game and some of the interesting aspects in that. Besides the program, the ticket, the program. We like to have scored programs in our pieces, actually scored at the game, not somebody who fills it out 3 months or 6 years later. And the person who signed our scorecard in the Don Larson piece was none other than Ed Sullivan. And at first you wonder, is it that Ed Sullivan or not? But we got photographic evidence. We actually have evidence of him signing programs at the game. He was actually a sports writer at that time.
He was?
Yes, he was a sports writer at that time. Another interesting aspect of that piece was we have an interesting item of Walter O'Malley signing, Don Larson signing a baseball to Walter O'Malley after the perfect game. Now, for me, it shocked me. His team just lost the perfect game. It's almost a humiliation to some degree, and yet he's asking Don Larson for an autograph. I can't see George Steinbrenner asking Pedro Martinez for his autograph if Pedro Martinez had perfect game the Yankees. I just think that would be hard to believe. But in retrospect, it showed me maybe his financial savvy, because a few years later he removes the Brooklyn Dodgers out, breaks the hearts of Dodger fans by bringing them out to California. And maybe he was just showing his financial savvy, because that ball is probably worth a fortune wherever it is.
We're talking to sports art expert Neil Scherer. Neil, would you say there's a big market for this type of memorabilia, or do you still feel it's in its infancy?
I would almost argue both. I think there is a big market for it, and again, we are basically, we think we're pretty, like, if we're not like, we think we're, like, as you had said, we're pretty unique and we're pretty different. And what makes us interesting, and I said before, we hit the sports fan, we hit the art fan, we hit the history fan. We call it our triple play. But I also think because of the serious situation that's in our country now, the virus, which is hitting so many people, we're beginning to look at sports a little bit differently. I've always contended it's very much a part of our culture, very much part of our routine, and I think people realize even more now it's part of our escape. And one of the things that I try to do with my pieces is show the history of these great moments in sports history. When I'm at my doing my museum show, whether it's the Yankee Red Sox rivalry museum show in Connecticut or the recent Polo Grounds one right here in New York, I love the fact that I bring out these elements of history, and I'm always a little bit nervous when somebody comes in and doesn't know who Jackie Robinson is, or doesn't know Roger Maris or Roberto Clemente. So it worries me a little bit. So I'm hoping I'm bringing those parts into getting kids interested again, because I think sports is such an important part of our history, our culture.
No question, Neil. When you look back and when you look back at your life, say 40 years ago,
yeah.
Do you ever reflect? Was there anything that you were doing differently than what your friends were doing with collectibles that you recall that really led you to your successful current sports occupation? And were you doing anything different?
Yes, I think that's a great question. In retrospect, I think I do, and I think again it has a lot to do with my father. When we would go to ball games, we would get the ticket and the program were almost mandatory. But after the game, we also would cut out the article of the Post or the Times or whatever newspaper, just so that years later we could look at it and the history of that game, because it is history. And I think when I look back upon it, I think that was a very smart thing my father did, because it showed me the interest in what did you do that particular day. Every game we go to has something special, I find, about it. One thing that I in today's market, a little bit that annoys me a little bit are the tickets that you get. I love getting old ticket stubs. I find them very, some of them have great character. And today when you go to games, sometimes you just get that crummy sheet of paper or something like that. So I think that when we think of games back then, it was interesting and important to me how games were looked upon back then, and getting those programs and getting those tickets and reading the articles, I think, influenced how I looked in the future and how I put pieces together today.
So how many art pieces do you have in your personal collection, would you say?
I have, again, I sell a lot of my pieces, and we commissioned more and more, which is actually fascinating, people getting to me. But we have about, we're kind of low. We probably have about 6 or 7 pieces in our current inventory. I probably have made 50 or 60 over the years. I mean, they do take a long time to put these things together, generally from 6 months to years to put them, to create them. But I think that also shows you how special, and if they're not one of a kind, how close they are to that. Currently now, we just completed a piece on Michael Phelps and his Olympic gold medals, the 1980 U.S. hockey team. One of the pieces I've been working on for about 3 years now is Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which I think is one of the greatest single game records ever in all sports. And so, a fascinating part is a lot of people come and they're fascinated by our pieces, whether it's Sandy Koufax's 4 no-hitter piece or perfect game piece that we did. And a gentleman came and said, Neil, I love what you do, but I'm a Walter Payton fan. So what we do now is more and more we're getting commission work. So he says, can you do a Walter Payton piece for us? And I said, give me a week. And in that week, I do all the research, anywhere from his time at Jackson State to his final game, and, of course, his Super Bowl and Pro Bowl games. And I give the gentleman my ideas. I almost always agree with them. They may want to put something personalized in it, a game with him and his father or something like that. And then we come up with a price, agreeable. Our pieces go from like $5,000 to over $100,000, depending on what items people want in there. and we ask for a deposit, and then we get to work. And what we do is, because we know our pieces take a long time to complete, is every 4 to 6 weeks we will call our client and tell them where we are. And I think they love being involved in the process. I think that the research and putting together these things is fascinating in its own right. And when you see it at the end, you go, wow. Even I go, wow. And if people know that I'm a kind of a perfectionist for myself, because the whole idea originally was that the pieces just be for myself. I didn't think at first that I was going to sell these. I wanted for my own collection. They know if it's good enough for me, it's probably going to be good enough for them.
We're talking to Neil Scherer. Neil, I would guess when creating this type of art, the larger size items such as like the colorful programs and the photos, I would assume that they appear much better on a piece than, let's say, like a ticket stub or a newspaper cutout. Would you agree? Because the photos could be, large, black and white. The programs are very colorful. Would you agree on that assumption?
There is, yeah. I think in many cases it is important. The imagery, of course, the items that we pick are important, especially the images. If we wanted to show like a Joe DiMaggio World Series home run piece or a Lou Gehrig World Series home run piece, the image which we just did, the image of Gehrig, we wanted to do a young, handsome Gehrig, and in this case, what we did, we used an artist named Adam Port to be the image. We didn't use a wire photo in this case, and people can't believe it's because his expertise is photorealism. People can't believe it's not a photograph. And we've mingled, again, I come from the art world, so we've mingled the art and sports together on a few pieces like that. And so the image that we pick is very important. But I will say this, sometimes the ticket stub can be the most expensive item in it. For example, in the Will Chamberlain piece, I have the ticket from that game that was played in Hershey, Pennsylvania, among 4,200 people. So it's very rare, and that's well over $10,000 piece. So maybe not, even though it's a small item, we may want to give it its own space so that people appreciate it. But you're right. Generally speaking, the larger pieces do capture the eye and the vision of the viewer, and you want them to be kind of special.
And Neil, as you know, authentication is so crucial
Very
in this
crucial.
business. On this show a few months ago, we had on the director of MLB Authentication Services, Mike Posner.
Okay.
And so with that being said, are your items authenticated by Major League Baseball?
They're authenticated by James Spence, who's often used by Major League Baseball. What's interesting is also I'm an attorney. So we take our due diligence, and I will say that there have been 2 times where an autograph has turned out not to be correct. In a way, I'm happy. If I was told that every one of my items was perfect for the last 10 years, I would have been a little suspicious of my authenticator. So, but I will tell you, I took a big hit in the Lou Gehrig piece that I put together of all his World Series home runs. And some of those autographs were very hard, like the Grover Cleveland Alexander, which was his first home run in, I believe, 1926 or 28. Jimmy Spence told me, Neil, your Lou Gehrig is not correct. And it hurt me. And we're talking about a $7,500, $8,000 hit. But I was more upset about the loss of time because I knew I would get my money back and I would do it. But we put it together, and we have everything authenticated, everything guaranteed. I guarantee everything. And again, that's part of what makes us, we do the due diligence. That's part of it. And as I said, I'm an attorney, so I take pride in having every one of our pieces guaranteed. And you'll get authenticating letters with all of our pieces from James Spence generally.
All right. So for the listeners on the, listening to the program, where can they view your items? Go ahead. Mention your website, Twitter feed, Facebook. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things is I wish I was a little stronger in social media. I'm getting there, but I'd still only give me a C. I have my website is goinggonesports.com, which has to be updated. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. And I'm beginning to start with Instagram. And it would probably be under Neil Scherer for those. And we generally show our newer pieces every time they're completed. And we welcome people to look at our things. And if people ever want a great gift for themselves, for a friend, for a neighbor, I will say one thing. One of our clients bought something from us. He brought the Sandy Koufax piece, and he called me up. He said, Neil, we're a quiet family here. But unfortunately, because we have the Sandy Koufax thing, every neighbor wants to come to our house all the time. So the only problem was if you want to, still be pretty quiet, you may have a little bit of trouble keeping the neighbors from coming to see your house if you have one of our pieces.
Now, do you attend like any major national sports conventions? Do you attend those conventions?
I haven't done that yet, and I want to do that, though, because, as you said, one of the things I think that does make us a little bit unique, again, is as I've said before, I come from the art world, not the memorabilia world. I deal with paintings from the Hudson River School of Bierstadt all the way to paintings of Basquiat. So I wasn't so familiar with that when I started out, but I know that they could be beneficial. You can always learn things. There's always that one or two items that I can't get that probably they would be helpful at. So I haven't been to that yet, but I hope in the next year or year and a half to go to the convention.
So you mentioned you come from the art world, and I don't really know much about art. Since I have you on, maybe you can come back and educate us on art. What determines the value of a nice piece of art?
That's always going to be a great question. I always tell people personally that in New York, go to galleries, go to auction houses for previews, and the first time you do it, just go around the room. Don't even look at the prices. Just let your eyes sort of galvanize, and eventually you'll realize that there'll be one or two pieces that you'll look at more than the others that will just for whatever reason grab your attention, and that's what I tell people to do generally. And it's fun to do it in New York. Eventually, after a while, you can learn more about that particular artist that your eyes gravitated to and study it. And it's a little bit like baseball cards. In the back of baseball cards, you'll learn when Mickey Mantle's best years were late 50s to early 60s, but his later years were not so great. Artists have the same thing. Artists have periods, which are considered their better years and not their better years. But also, as I always tell people, even the 220 hitter hits a home run. I mean, I was just watching recently the 69 World Series, which I did a piece on Al Weiss hit a home run. He was about a 210, 220 hitter. So you have to be careful because although there are certain periods that an artist might be great, they may just, and also an artist that isn't so great may have his 10 too. So it's a little tricky, but I always say the more you go, the more you visit, and the more you see, you will in your own, and then you study it. You read about the artist like you do about a baseball player. You'll capture your attention, and you'll still start to enjoy it, and you'll start to study it, and you'll start to see what prices they bring at auctions, a little bit like you might want to do at baseball cards and things like that. So there is a definite connection.
So Neil, with art, does the art industry have an authentication service as well?
Yes, they do, but it's not a service. It's
okay.
And it's generally certain artists have experts. So Bierstadt may have an expert. Another one. Unfortunately, what's happening is that, and I always would go, and Edward Hopper has their expert. The problem is sometimes that because of lawsuits and things like that, some of the experts have frowned away from giving opinions. I mean, you could see when you're talking about $1 million or $2 million item, it could cause great anxiety if somebody bought that and it turned out that it has an issue. But those are areas that don't happen that often, and you hopefully what you do, I guess, also with sports items is you look for the provenance and the history and all that stuff. So there is connection, and you try to do the best you can. That's what I do with all my pieces, whether art or sports, is get the provenance, get authenticating letters when possible, but not all the time can you get that.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. I also want to thank your baby sister. Do you want to speak a little bit about her and what she's been doing, your baby sister?
Yeah, well, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and growing up in Mount Vernon, of course, when I went away, my freshman year at University of Wisconsin, not only did my brothers take away my baseball card collection, but my mother and father gave me a present of a baby sister. Well, now she's a doctor at NYU Langone, and she is handling a lot of the virus situation, and it's we worry about her. She's on the front lines. We get some reports from her about it and how difficult a disease this is, a virus this is. But from what I gather from her, she says it's becoming more and more manageable in NYU Langone. And let's hope that sooner rather than later, they will get control of hopefully a vaccine, and then we can go on to going to see baseball games again in person.
Yeah, well, she's doing fabulous work, and, I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Final question. What do you think of the baseball season? Is it coming back?
I hope so. Even my mother, who wasn't a great sports fan, is dying for it to come back. Again, I've said it's so much part of our routine, part of our culture, and part of our escape. When you think about wars in the past, even when we had wars, we could go to the movie theater. We could even go to the baseball game, even if it was inferior baseball teams. There was that escape and entertainment. And I think we don't have that now. I guess we're lucky we have the computer and TV. But I think it's very much a needed thing, and I think it will just give us a chance to catch our breath a little bit and start to relax a little bit. And I think it'd be great for our society. So I'm rooting for it. I hope the Major League and the players get together, because even a short season would still be great, and I think it would be a great relief, and America would really appreciate it.
No, I agree. And besides TV, we also have your sports art to bring us back to the game.
Yes,
so,
feel free to relive these moments with my pieces. Again, one piece that I did that does very much connect with baseball cards. In 1978, Bucky Dent, the famous Bucky Dent game in the playoffs against the Red Sox. Again, I was a freshman at Wisconsin and with my two Red Sox roommates. Anyway, I do a piece on that moment. Again, I have the ticket, the program, but we have the cards from every player who played on both the Red Sox and the Yankees on 78. And what's interesting is Bob Lemon's card and Jim Spencer on the Yankees are shown as White Sox, because they started the year as managers, managed for the White Sox, and Jim Spencer played for the White Sox as first baseman. And it just shows you how sports is always changing. And of course, when Billy Martin got fired for the 10,000th time or whatever, Bob Lemon took over, and that piece, I think, might be even more special to your listeners who love baseball cards and the great game of baseball.
Well, Neil, thank you so much. We'll do it again, okay? I appreciate it. Great job.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope when I get my next exhibition, which I'm working on, that you and all your fans and listeners could come and see it. We always appreciate people coming. I think you'll have a great time, too.
I appreciate that. Take care of yourself and be well.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Take care. That was Neil Scherer. Until next week, happy collecting to all.